He thought he had it all, a perfect family, a newborn son, and a bright future. But a cryptic note shatters his world, revealing hidden betrayals and a family secret he never saw coming. When tragedy strikes, will love be enough to mend what's broken, or will the truth destroy everything? Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm bringing you a fascinating story from Nigeria. This is not your everyday tale. It's filled with lessons, intrigue and tradition. If you're new here, please subscribe for more captivating stories like this one. Now, sit back, relax, and listen carefully to this amazing narration. Kelvin was bubbling with excitement as he drove along the highway to Mother Care Maternity Hospital in Lagos. Today was the day he would bring home his wife Sarah and their newborn son. Over the past few days, he had been busy preparing for their arrival, decorating the baby's nursery with bright colours, cooking a delicious family dinner, and planning a warm welcome for his lovely wife and their precious child. On his way to the hospital, Kelvin made a quick stop at a shopping mall. He wanted everything to be perfect, so he picked up some balloons to make their homecoming even more special. With his heart full of joy, he resumed his journey. When Kelvin finally arrived at the hospital, he was greeted with a scene he could never have anticipated. His excitement quickly turned into confusion and dread. Sarah, his beloved wife, was nowhere to be found. Instead, their newborn son lay quietly in his cradle, wrapped snugly in a blanket. Panic began to set in as Kelvin tried to make sense of the situation. At first, his mind jumped to the worst possible conclusion. Had something terrible happened to Sarah? Had she passed away? But then he reasoned with himself. If something tragic had occurred, surely the doctor would have informed me beforehand. Desperate for answers, Kelvin raced down the hospital corridors, searching for any sign of Sarah. He checked every room, every corner, but there was no trace of her. Out of breath and overwhelmed, he rushed to the reception desk to speak with the nurses on duty. "Where is my wife? Sarah, where did she go?" Kelvin demanded, his voice trembling with worry. The nurses exchanged uneasy glances before one of them stepped forward. "We don't know where she went," the nurse admitted, "but she left this envelope for you." With shaky hands, Kelvin took the envelope and tore it open. His heart sank as he read the note inside. "Goodbye, honey. Please take good care of our son. Ask your mother why she did this to me." Kelvin froze, his mind racing. He read the note again and again, hoping it would somehow make sense. But the cryptic message only left him more confused. What could this mean? What did my mother do to her? Desperation washed over him as he pulled out his cell phone and tried calling Sarah. Her number was unreachable. He dialed again and again, but the result was the same. He reached out to her close friends and anyone who might know where she was, but no one could offer any answers. It was as if Sarah had vanished into thin air. Kelvin felt like his entire world was crumbling around him. His heart ached, his mind raced, and his body trembled under the weight of uncertainty. Yet, despite the chaos swirling inside him, he knew he had to stay strong for the sake of his son. Clutching the baby in his arms, Kelvin made his way back home. As he drove, his thoughts spiraled, replaying every moment of Sarah's pregnancy. She seemed so happy. Or was I blind to her pain? He wondered. The memory of her glowing smile and excited chatter felt so real, yet now it all seemed like a distant dream. Kelvin knew this was only the beginning of a journey filled with questions he desperately needed answers to. Why had Sarah left? What role did his mother play in this heartbreaking turn of events? And most importantly, could he ever bring his family back together? Stay tuned, because this story is far from over. There's much more to uncover as Kelvin begins his search for the truth. That evening, as Kelvin pulled into his driveway with his son in the back seat, his heart was a whirlwind of emotions. His mother came out to greet him, her face lighting up with joy. "Oh, let me see my cute grandson," she exclaimed, reaching out eagerly. But Kelvin took a step back, his expression dark and serious. "Not yet, Mom. What did you do to Sarah?" Her smile faded instantly. She stood frozen, staring at Kelvin's troubled face. "Mom?" Kelvin's voice was firmer this time, almost trembling with anger. "What did you do to my wife?" His mother's face went pale. Her eyes darted nervously, and her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. Finally, she shook her head and said, "Kelvin, I don't know what you're talking about." She sounded confused, but there was something in her tone that didn't sit right with Kelvin. "Mom, don't lie to me," he demanded, his voice rising. "I'm not lying," she insisted, avoiding his gaze. "I've never done or said anything to Sarah." That night, Kelvin sat alone in the nursery, staring at his son as he slept. Memories of Sarah flooded his mind. She had always seemed so happy during her pregnancy. She laughed often, shared her dreams about their future, and was excited to meet their baby. But now, as Kelvin replayed those moments, he began to wonder. He remembered how his mother would sometimes throw out seemingly innocent comments about Sarah. They were small things, remarks about her cooking, her family background, or the way she managed the house. Sarah would always laugh them off, and so did he. But now he couldn't shake the feeling that those words might have hurt her more than she let on. Days turned into weeks, and Kelvin was struggling. He had to juggle work, sleepless nights, endless crying fits, both from the baby and from himself. He felt like he was drowning in the overwhelming responsibilities of single fatherhood while grappling with the gaping hole Sarah had left in his life. He called everyone who knew Sarah, desperately hoping someone might know where she was. Most of them were as clueless as he was, but one day her closest friend, Sandra, finally opened up. "Kelvin," Sandra said hesitantly, "Sarah really struggled with your mom. She didn't say much to you because she thought you'd side with her, but your mom was difficult. She always made Sarah feel like she wasn't good enough for you." Sandra's words hit Kelvin like a punch to the gut. Had his mother's behavior been driving Sarah away all along? Determined to find answers, Kelvin visited Sarah's family. But they too were in the dark. Her mother grew increasingly worried. "This isn't like Sarah," she said. "She would never just disappear like this, especially not after giving birth." Kelvin filed a missing persons report with the police and searched everywhere he could think of. Weeks turned into months, and still there was no sign of Sarah. Sometimes he wondered if she had drowned herself out of despair or if she had been kidnapped. Those dark thoughts haunted him, making his days unbearable and his nights sleepless. When their son's first birthday came around, it was a bittersweet moment. Kelvin tried to put on a brave face for his boy, but his heart was heavy. He had lost hope of ever seeing Sarah again. But was this the end? For how long could Sarah stay hidden? Stay tuned, because this story is far from over. The truth has a way of coming out, and Kelvin's search for answers is just beginning. One fateful day, while Kelvin's young son was playing in the living room, something tragic occurred. The little boy suddenly collapsed. Panic-stricken, Kelvin rushed him to the hospital, where the child was admitted into the accident and emergency unit. Later that day, doctors informed Kelvin of the devastating news. His son had been diagnosed with a rare illness and needed an urgent blood transfusion. But there was a bigger problem. Kelvin's blood type didn't match his son's. That night, a nurse who had previously spoken to Sarah her disappearance decided to contact her. She explained the critical situation, telling Sarah that her son's life depended on a blood transfusion and that her blood type matched his. The very next day, as Kelvin sat anxiously in the hospital reception, he saw someone walk through the doors, someone he hadn't seen in over a year. It was Sarah. She looked healed, fresh and confident. For a moment, Kelvin was frozen, unable to believe his eyes. As Sarah approached the counter, he sprang to his feet and rushed toward her. "Sarah, is it really you?" he exclaimed. But Sarah held up her hand and took a step back. She looked at him with guarded eyes. Kelvin was overwhelmed with emotions. "Sarah, please," he pleaded, "let me talk to you." It was the first time in a year that Kelvin had seen Sarah. After so much persuasion, Sarah finally agreed to speak to him. Later that day, they sat together, and Sarah began to open up. With tears in her eyes, Sarah revealed the reason for her disappearance. "Kelvin," she began, her voice trembling, "I overheard your mother advising you to take a new wife because I couldn't give you a child after 10 years of trying. I was devastated. I wept and felt so betrayed. But it didn't stop there. Your mother brought a woman from the village into our home and introduced her as your wife. I couldn't take it anymore, so I left." Kelvin listened in shock, his heart breaking as he heard her words. But when Sarah finished, he gently took her hands and said, "Sarah, I understand how much pain you must have felt, but you need to know the truth. Kelvin explained how his mother had indeed tried to persuade him to take another wife, but he had shunned her suggestion outright. "Sarah," he said firmly, "you've been with me from the very beginning. You're my wife, my partner, and my only love. I would never betray you like that." He went on to recount how, on the day his mother brought the woman from the village, he had asked the woman to leave along with all her belongings. "I made it clear to my mother that no one could ever take your place," Kelvin said. "You are the only one I love, Sarah, no one else." Sarah's tears flowed freely as she listened to Kelvin's heartfelt confession. For the first time in a long time, she felt the love and reassurance she had been longing for. They embraced tightly, letting go of the pain and misunderstandings that had kept them apart. From that day forward, Kelvin and Sarah began to rebuild the bond they had almost lost. Together, they worked through the pain, the betrayal, and the wounds left behind by the past. Their shared love for their son and their commitment to each other gave them the strength to start anew. And so, this story ends with hope, healing, and the promise of a brighter future. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more inspiring and thought-provoking stories. Until next time, stay safe and stay tuned.
Thank you.